In today's video, we're going to be breaking down how to train your back effectively. I think for a lot of people, they don't know how to train specific muscle groups of their back, like our rhomboids or our mid traps versus more of our lats or even of our upper trap and lower traps. That's what we'll be diving into today, and let's just get into it. So like I said, the three main areas we're going to be targeting today are going to be a majority of the muscles you're going to be looking to train in the back. Now, there are going to be some other muscles that are going to help out, and as much as I would like to think we can isolate a certain muscle group, particularly, we can't exactly 100% isolate each muscle, right? So if we're training more of the upper back, and let's say our elbows are flared out more inwards, kind of more of a 45-degree elbow flare, we're actually going to get a good amount of our upper back and our lats involved. We may even get a little bit of the upper trap and lower trap, depending on kind of like which angle we're training from. But essentially, what I want you to get at is we are going to be having some carryover or some crossover here, and that's okay. We're not going to be able to isolate one muscle group in particular, but as long as we're training certain principles and with some of the tips I'm going to give you guys today, that's going to really help you isolate more of the muscles you want to train versus getting some extra fluff where you may not need it. So the upper back, we have our rhomboids and our middle traps here. So these are just our main kind of scapular retractor muscles. We'll talk more on that later. We have our lats, which is a huge muscle that goes basically, it takes up a majority of our back. We have three main sections of that. We have our thoracic area or thoracic region. We have our lumbar region, and we have our iliac region, which essentially is just where those muscles actually attach in the, I guess where they actually origin, they don't insert there. They originate from the midline here. And then we have some other muscles that we'll talk about today too. That's going to be more of our upper trap and our lower trap here. So for our upper back, we're, like I said, mainly talking about our rhomboids and our mid traps, and we're training more of our scapular retraction muscles. So rhomboids, mid traps. Now, when people think about squeezing the shoulder blades, they think of squeezing the shoulder blades back and down. That's not exactly the way that our rhomboids actually squeeze, our rhomboid major and minor. The way they actually contract is they actually go back and up. This anatomy is not exactly a representation of what it looks like. We do want to have a little bit more of a diagonal force of those rhomboids because they actually help with downward rotation. So getting more into the nitty gritty there, but essentially for normal shoulder blade movement, they are going to have this up and together motion that we have there for the scapular retraction. So when we talk about training and what that's going to look like, we're going to want to choose something with a wider grip. So we have a wider and a closer to neutral grip. So when we talk about neutral, we're not talking about our thumb really facing this way. A lot of times we can still get some work there, but normally we want to have more of a pronated grip, especially for the wider stuff. The wider grip is going to allow our elbows to be in a good position and also just be able to flare out our elbows at a decent range. The thing is, when we go with a wider grip, our elbows are naturally going to flare out, and that's a good thing because what we're trying to do is we're trying to align our arm, our humerus, along with the diagonal pattern of those rhomboids and those middle traps there. We want to get the scapular retraction, and so having our elbows in the same line of pull as those muscles is going to get the best bang for buck out of the movement, and you'll get a lot more basically activation of the rhomboids and mid traps versus getting things like the lats involved there. It's really good to have some isolation stuff there too, because like I said, our lats are a big muscle and they tend to help out a lot. So when we can isolate some more of these other muscles and get those working better and just isolating those, obviously it's going to be better for muscle development and you're going to look more full overall. We want to focus on the squeeze of the shoulder blades as well. So we want to focus on squeezing the shoulder blades back and up, right? And then we also want to focus on stretching those muscles. So letting them kind of round forward as much as we can, not excessively. We don't want to really start to round too much at our rib cage, but we do want to let those shoulders round forward on the rib cage as a whole to get the most range of motion out of that. When it comes to the lats are, like I said, a big group of it's one muscle, but it's a couple of different regions of those muscles that have different lines of pull that we'll talk about. But essentially the lat itself, when we talk about it as a whole, we are mainly talking about our humeral extension range of motion. So basically bringing the arm back behind us, a deduction, so bringing the arm closer to our midline, and then more internal rotation, just because where the lats attach at in our arm, it actually attaches more on the front side of the anterior side of our humerus. It actually is going to pull our humerus inwards. So that's how we get the internal rotation there. Like I said, we have 3 divisions. We have our thoracic area, so kind of more of these upper fibers here that go a little bit more horizontal. And as we get lower and lower, they start to get a little bit more diagonal. So as we get into lumbar region in the low back area, lumbar, we're going to start seeing those muscles kind of get more diagonal. And then as we get to the iliac, it is very, very diagonal. Like it's probably the most we got. When it comes to training these muscle groups, there's going to be certain ranges of motion that are going to be best for certain areas of our lats. Like I said, it's a big group of muscle, and we want to make sure that we can target not only our iliac or our thoracic, but get all of those muscles engaged. And for some people, they have a hard time maybe feeling more of the iliac because of the way they're pulling. They're not seeing good development there. So for our exercise selection, generally speaking, we are going to want to keep our elbows closer to the side of our torso. We're also going to have less scapular motion because just essentially where the lats are involved, we only get a little bit of the thoracic lat basically on the scapula. Everything else is just attached to our humerus. That's where the lat inserts at. So we want to make sure that we are mainly getting more humeral extension, kind of more arm movement versus a lot of scapular movement. The scapula is naturally going to move as we raise our arm in certain positions, but generally speaking, we're going to want to keep the elbow pretty close into the torso. And like I said before, there is going to be a little bit of carryover in some of these muscle groups. We're not going to exactly be able to isolate, let's say, our upper back compared to our lats all the way. There's going to be some carryover there, or crossover where some muscle groups are both going to be hit. It's not going to be, it's a good blend of both, and it's a good way to get in the most stimulus for a lot of muscles. But when we're talking about isolation, this is really where we can bring in an elbow position to get more lats involved. Rows and pull downs mainly in front of the body. So mainly for our thoracic, we're still going to want to keep our elbow close in, but we're just going to want to focus primarily on our humeral extensions. So just bringing the elbow back as far as we can and basically just keeping the elbow kind of tucked into the body. For our lumbar region, we can slightly flare out our elbows a little bit more and kind of get more of a wider row, kind of more 45 compared to where our upper back, we want our elbows flared out a little bit more than that. So bringing in the elbows around 45 is a good way to target our lumbar region. And for our iliac region is a little bit harder to target. Normally, you're going to need some kind of pull down or something like that. And a lot of times we'll think of pull downs, we'll think about pulling down like a wide grip lat pull down. And the thing is, our lats kind of round over our rib cage. They kind of go in front of us. So when we pull down, we actually want to have our elbows more in front of the body because that's just the way the lats are involved. We kind of move more from front to back instead of kind of like in this side to side plane here. That would really be beneficial. And I think for a lot of people, especially training the iliac region, it's kind of a hard area to really target unless you are training with, basically right about here at 90 degrees is where our 90 degrees of shoulder flexion is where we're going to be able to train our lats in our iliac region of our lats the best. So doing a pull down with, like I said, the elbows in front of you, not so much out to the side like we would during a wide grip pull down. It's not that those are bad. We can still train some lats involved there, but it's going to be more, it's more of an upper back row at that point because we are just focusing on squeezing the shoulder blades together in the back and kind of pulling more to our chest, which is obviously, once again, flaring out the elbows. We're going to be getting more of our upper back involved. All right, and finishing up here, just for a couple of different muscle groups that you may want to target when it comes to the back. We're not going to talk about rear delts today. That's more of like the shoulder side of things. But for the rest of our back, we're going to be talking about the upper trap and lower trap. Now, these muscles, the upper trap definitely has a bad rap. And I definitely think that, it's kind of like it's stigmatized a little bit. But really, upper traps, they're just involved in scapular elevation and as well as just our normal shoulder blade movement. They have a big part in they do a part of retraction as far as like shoulder blade stability, but they also help with the normal upward rotation of our shoulder blade as we raise our arm. So to train the upper, that's more of the upper trap. The lower trap here is going to be actually kind of the opposite. We're going to be training more scapular depression, so the shoulder blade going down, but they still have a good part in the relationship of the upward rotation. We have a couple different muscles there, the upper trap, lower trap, and I believe the serratus anterior, if I remember correctly, essentially help with the upward rotation of our shoulder blade there. Now, once again, to train these muscles, we want to make sure that we're training in the line of the muscle fiber. So for upper trap, these muscle fibers up here, it kind of is in line with the shoulder, and I don't have a side-by-side photo or like a side view of the muscle here, but essentially, unless we bring our arms out in front, the traps don't really have a good line of pull. So one thing I always recommend when it comes to upper trap training is just leaning forward slightly. All that's going to do is just put your traps in a better advantage to actually do their job and do more of the scapular elevation or bringing up their shoulder blades. And that's a good exercise for those. Normally, when you're doing any kind of back work, you're also going to get upper traps involved slightly because, like I said, they help with the normal scapulohumeral rhythm of our shoulder blade. And kind of as we raise our arm up, our shoulder blade naturally is going to raise up. The upper traps and lower traps help out with that upward rotation. Now, to train the lower trap, once again, we want to train along with the muscle fiber. And the muscle fiber you can see here is very diagonal. So we're going to want our arm and our upper arm in the same kind of line of that. There's a line of the muscle fibers here. So kind of more in like a Y position. A good exercise for this, you can do like a chest supported dumbbell Y raise is a great exercise to kind of train more of the upper traps. Training with a cable is going to be probably a little bit more advantageous that we have tension on the muscle the entire time. You're able to really work through the full range of motion with tension on it versus during a dumbbell, you may not have as much tension at the bottom of a Y raise in that sense. Now, just some general training tips just to help out and just make sure that you guys leave with some tangible advice to move forward and make sure you can implement into your training today is make sure you get full range of motion where available. We're not trying to do a lot of extra motion here, but we do want to make sure that when we're training things like the upper back, we are getting the full retraction and protraction of the shoulder blades, basically the full squeeze and the full stretch of the shoulder blades, or the muscles between the shoulder blades of the rhomboids and our mid traps when we're doing those exercises. The full range of motion is where we're going to get a lot of the actual benefit of the exercise, especially when we're training close to failure. Another thing I wanted to comment on here is just fixed hand placements can make it hard for you to isolate certain muscle groups. So for example, like if we have a barbell row, it may make it harder for you to get more lats involved depending on kind of like how your grip is. And that's the thing is there's not a lot of wiggle room for our wrist to be able to rotate and just have a more comfortable line of pull. So I always recommend having some either handles. So if it's a dumbbell, that's even better because you have the ability to actually rotate your arm in different planes of motion. And also cables, because cables obviously have a lot more free range of motion. You can pull, and the best thing about cables is that it does allow you to have consistent kind of tension on the muscle if you do it right. Versus a dumbbell, you're at kind of the limits of gravity and just kind of that side of things. Now, the last tip I'll leave you guys with, and then we'll wrap up, is leading with the elbows, not with the hands. I think I see too many people leading with the hands, and all that does is it just leads to more kind of this external rotation, internal rotation shit happening at our at our shoulder blade, and it leads just to more kind of shoulder irritation as a whole. What we want to do is when we're focusing on targeting our back, our forearms really have no say on kind of like what our back is going to do. It's our elbows driving the movement, right? Since our arm or the muscles attached to our humerus, right on the inside of the humerus, whatever we do for our back, especially for our lats there, it's not really going to matter what we do with our hands. Our hands are just kind of along for the ride. So one of the best tips I would say is use your hand as an anchor to just hold on to the cable, hold on to the dumbbell. Using kind of a hook grip is what I normally do to make sure I don't pull too much with my hands. And then I focus on just leading with my elbow, making sure that my elbow has a good line of pull and making sure that it's aligned up with what muscles I actually want to hit. If you got value out of this, let me know by leaving a comment down below. Feel free to like or even subscribe. There's more videos on the way, and hope you have a good rest of your day.